Okay, let's get one thing straight before we start. When Waverly Nash walked into that office on the 32nd floor, she was not prepared for what was about to happen. Nobody ever is, but life has this charming little habit of not asking permission before it blows everything up. And on this particular Tuesday morning in October, Chicago's skyline sharp and cold outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, life had something spectacular planned. The room smelled like expensive coffee and the kind of confidence that comes with a 9-figure net worth. Waverly had been summoned. That was the only word for it. Summoned. The way you'd call someone who doesn't really belong in a room but needs to be there for something very specific. She was the creative director at Callaway & Reed, a mid-size agency on the 21st floor of the same building. Good work, solid reputation, nothing that would warrant a meeting with the man who occupied the top 3 floors like he owned them. He did own them, technically, but that's beside the point. She straightened her blazer in the elevator, checked her reflection in the mirrored doors, told herself this was routine. It was not routine. Grant Hollis, 35 years old, CEO of Hollis Capital Group, sat behind a desk that cost more than Waverly's first car, her second car, and possibly her apartment combined. He had the kind of jaw that looked carved out of a dare, and dark eyes that were watching her walk across the room the way people watch chess pieces, calculating, interested, utterly unreadable. He didn't stand. She didn't wait for an invitation to sit. "Already," said a small, amused voice somewhere behind the camera of life. "I like her, Miss Nash." His voice was low, unhurried. "Thank you for coming up. Your assistant called 4 times. Twice. The second call was at 7:52 a.m. on a Tuesday. That counts twice, on principle." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Close, though. Dangerously close. Fair enough. He slid a folder across the desk with 2 fingers, the gesture of a man used to people reaching for things he offers. "I'll get to the point, please." He got to the point. "And here's where I need you to stay with me, because what came out of Grant Hollis's mouth next was so absurd, so spectacularly audacious, that Waverly Nash, a woman who had once talked a client out of a lawsuit using nothing but a whiteboard and sheer nerve, actually went silent for 4 full seconds. Grant Hollis wanted a contractual arrangement, 12 months, public appearances, industry events, his grandmother's 80th birthday gala in December, which apparently was a situation. In exchange, a fully renewed 3-year contract for Callaway & Reed with Hollis Capital's portfolio companies. Value, $4.8 million. The title on the folder's cover page read in clean sans serif font, Personal Representation Agreement, Exclusive Arrangement. Waverly stared at it, then at him, then back at it. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" "Fiancé." He said it like a correction in a quarterly report. The board skews traditional. "Fiancé, 12 months with optional, no." He paused. "You haven't read Clause 11. "I don't need to read Clause 11. She closed the folder, pushed it back, stood up in one smooth motion that she had absolutely not rehearsed 100 times in situations exactly like this, because nothing in her life had ever been exactly like this. "With complete professional respect, Mr. Hollis, you can take this contract and file it somewhere I won't suggest out loud." She picked up her bag, walked to the door, opened it, turned back just once because she was human and couldn't help it, and found him watching her with that same unreadable expression, the folder sitting untouched in front of him. "Have a good morning," she said, and left. "You want to applaud her right now. I know. I did too." Heels clicking down the marble hallway, chin up, shoulders back, the elevator button pressed with the practiced calm of someone who is absolutely, completely, 100% fine. The doors closed. Waverly leaned against the back wall, let out a breath so long it could have fogged a window. What, she whispered to no one, was that? She was back at her desk by 10, coffee in hand, back to normal. The whole thing filed under bizarre things that won't be mentioned again in the very organized cabinet of her mind. Her assistant, Danny Price, 26 and constitutionally incapable of reading a room, dropped a stack of papers at her desk at 11:45 with the energy of someone delivering catastrophic news to someone who deserved it. "Did you see the company-wide email? I've been in back-to-back calls since." "Waverly," he said her name the way people say it when they need you to stop moving. "Did you see the email?" She looked up. His face was doing something complicated. She picked up her phone. Internal notice, Callaway & Reed. "It is with great enthusiasm that we announce Callaway & Reed has been acquired by Hollis Capital Group effective today, October 14th.
Current leadership will remain in place through a 90-day transition period. A company-wide meeting has been scheduled at 2 p.m. today in Conference Room A. Grant Hollis, CEO, Hollis Capital Group. I'll give you a moment. I needed one too. The first time I read that, the man had bought the company, her company, in less than 2 hours because she said no. Waverly read the email 3 times.
The way you read something when your brain keeps rejecting the information like a bad software update. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number, Chicago area code. She knew. She answered anyway. You bought the company. Her voice came out remarkably steady. She was proud of that. Later, I acquired an agency with significant untapped market potential. Grant Hollis sounded like he was reading from a press release he had personally written and memorized. The meeting this afternoon will address the transition plan. That is the most expensive power move I have ever witnessed in my professional life. A beat. I prefer decisive business decision. That's not what this is. 2 p.m., Conference Room A. Another pause, shorter than the first. I'll have coffee brought in. I remember you. Take it black. The line went quiet. Waverly pulled the phone away from her ear and stared at it. He remembered how she took her coffee from a meeting that lasted 11 minutes from a man who had just purchased the place where she worked because she walked out of a room. She should have quit on the spot, left the building, called a lawyer. Instead, she did the one thing that changed everything. She went to the meeting. And that right there, that single, stubborn, absolutely characteristic decision is where this story truly begins. Hold on, it's about to get very interesting. Here's something nobody tells you about power dynamics. They only work when the other person cooperates. Grant Hollis had spent 12 years building a reputation as the man who walked into rooms and immediately owned them. Boards, negotiations, quarterly reviews where grown executives went pale and adjusted their ties. He had a system, a rhythm, a specific kind of silence he deployed like a precision instrument. Waverly Nash did not cooperate with any of it, which the narrator notes with something close to delight was about to become his problem. Conference Room A at Callaway and Reed sat 14 people comfortably and 20 people tensely. At 1:58 p.m. on October 14th, it held 23. Word had traveled fast. It always does when the building gets sold out from under you on a Tuesday. Waverly arrived at 1:59. She took the seat closest to the door, not because she planned to leave, but because she was the kind of person who liked knowing where the exits were. Her coffee was already there, black, in a clean white cup that had definitely not been there before. She stared at it for exactly 2 seconds. Then she picked it up and drank it, because she was not going to let a cup of coffee win. Now we're talking, said the narrator. Grant walked in at 2 p.m. exactly. Not 2:01, not 1:59, 2:00. If anyone had been watching the second hand, which 2 people definitely were. He had his sleeves rolled to the elbow now, jacket gone, collar open, 1 button. The kind of calculated informality that said, I'm approachable, while the rest of him said, I own this building and 4 others like it. He set a single folder on the table, didn't open it, and looked around the room the way a person looks around a room when they've already decided what they think of everyone in it. His eyes landed on Waverly for exactly 1 second longer than everyone else. She looked back with the expression of a woman reviewing a contract she fully intended to reject. Thank you all for being here, he said. I'll keep this brief. He did not keep it brief. For 20 minutes, Grant Hollis outlined the acquisition with the calm efficiency of someone who found corporate restructuring genuinely interesting. Portfolio integration, market positioning, talent retention. A new creative vertical that Callaway and Reed was uniquely positioned to anchor. It was objectively an excellent plan. Waverly hated how excellent it was. She had her legal pad in front of her, yellow, college-ruled, the kind that meant business, and she took notes in the precise, aggressive handwriting of someone who was absolutely paying attention and absolutely not happy about what they were paying attention to. Around her, colleagues shifted from panic to cautious optimism. Danny Price, seated 2 chairs down, had stopped looking like he was calculating escape routes and started looking like he was calculating raises. Traitor, Waverly thought, without real heat. Then Grant said, I'd like to retain the current creative leadership structure entirely, starting with the creative director. 22 heads turned toward Waverly. She put her pen down, looked at Grant.
You'd like to retain me. Your division generated 38% of this agency's revenue last quarter with 60% less overhead than the accounts team. He said it like a statistic, clean and unbothered. Yes, I'd like to retain you. Under what terms? A beat. Something moved behind his eyes. Terms we can discuss separately. We can discuss them now. She gestured at the room with the pen. Everyone here has a stake in the transition structure. Whatever terms apply to my position set a precedent for the team. She just used his own logic against him in front of his new employees. The narrator is not even going to pretend to be neutral here. That was exceptional. 2 seats to Grant's left, his VP of Operations, a compact, sharp-eyed woman named Ree Calloway, who was absolutely no relation to the agency's founding family and clearly been working with Grant long enough to read every micro-expression he had, pressed her lips together in what
might have been amusement. Grant looked at Waverly for a long moment. Standard retention packages, he said finally. 15% salary adjustment across the creative division. Project bonuses tied to quarterly performance. All current contracts honored through transition. The room exhaled. Waverly wrote it down word for word on her yellow legal pad. I'll need that in writing by end of day. You'll have it by 4. 3:30. A pause so brief it was almost not a pause at all. 3:30. Danny Price was visibly trying not to smile. Around the table, the energy had shifted entirely from dread to something that felt almost like confidence. Waverly picked up her coffee, drank, said nothing else. The meeting ended at 2:34 p.m. People filtered out in clusters, the low murmur of cautious relief following them down the hallway. Waverly stayed seated, reviewing her notes, waiting for the room to empty the way she always did. She thought better in the quiet left behind by other people's noise. She did not expect Grant Hollis to still be there when she looked up. He was standing at the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the skyline, the way people look at things they're used to owning. That was a power move, he said without turning around. You would know a short sound, not quite a laugh. Almost. Fair. Waverly closed her legal pad, stood. What actually happens to this agency, Mr. Hollis? Past the slide deck and the retention packages. He turned, then leaned against the windowsill with the ease of someone who had long ago made peace with taking up space. It grows. The creative vertical feeds 3 of my portfolio companies that have been hemorrhaging on outside agency costs. Your team does the work in-house. Better margins, better output, full creative control on your end. And the catch? There's no catch. There's always a catch. He looked at her steadily. The catch is that it requires the creative director to actually trust the structure enough to work within it. I don't trust structures I didn't build. I know. Something in his tone shifted just slightly. That's why I'm telling you how it was built. Waverly studied him for a moment, the kind of moment where you're doing rapid private calculations that you would never admit to out loud. He was not what she'd expected. She wasn't sure what she'd expected. Something colder, maybe more transactional. The person who'd made a $4.8 million business decision in retaliation for an 11-minute meeting should have been easier to dismiss. He wasn't. She found that deeply inconvenient. I'll read the retention agreement at 3:30, she said. If the language matches what you said in that room, we can talk about next steps. And if it doesn't, then we'll have a different conversation. She picked up her legal pad, her bag, her coffee cup, and walked to the door with the unhurried precision of someone who had never once left a room in a hurry. At the threshold, she stopped, didn't turn around. How did you know I take my coffee black? A beat, just one. You had a cup on your desk the morning your team presented the Meridian pitch. 3rd floor conference room, 8 a.m. You never touched the creamer caddy. Waverly stood very still for exactly 2 seconds. Then she walked out. He noticed her coffee order 8 months ago at a pitch meeting where he was a peripheral attendee and she was running the room. I'm just going to leave that right there. By 3:28 p.m., the retention agreement was in her inbox. Every term, exact wording, nothing softened, nothing added, nothing that wasn't said out loud in front of 23 witnesses. Waverly read it twice. Then she opened a reply, typed, "Language is acceptable. Next steps at your convenience." Deleted, "at your convenience." Typed, "Language is acceptable. I'm available Thursday." Sent it before she could edit it again. His reply came in 4 minutes. Grant Hollis, Thursday at 9. I'll have coffee ready. She stared at that last line for longer than she intended,
put her phone face down on the desk, picked it back up, put it down again. "Everything okay?" Danny appeared in her doorway with the radar of someone who had learned to read the difference between her various kinds of silence. "Fine," she said. "Completely fine." She was not completely fine, but she was starting to understand that fine and interesting were not mutually exclusive. And Grant Hollis, against every reasonable expectation, was turning out to be very, very interesting. Let me tell you something about Thursday mornings. They have no business being as consequential as they are. Monday gets all the drama. Friday gets all the anticipation. Thursday just sits there quietly looking like nothing, and then rearranges everything. This particular Thursday, Waverly Nash arrived at the 32nd floor at 8:59 a.m. with a legal pad, a pen, a printed copy of the retention agreement with 6 annotations in the margins, and a very clear professional agenda. She had a list. She always had a list. The list was not going to survive the next 2 hours, but she didn't know that yet, so let her have it. Grant's assistant, a composed, quick-eyed man named Theo Burke, who looked like he had seen everything and been surprised by none of it, met her at the elevator and walked her not to the conference room she had
Expected, but to a smaller room at the far end of the floor, corner office adjacent, floor to ceiling, windows on 2 sides, a round table instead of a rectangular one, which changed the geometry of the whole thing. No head of the table, no power position, just 2 chairs angled toward the Chicago skyline, like they were both there to look at the same thing. A coffee setup sat on the credenza. Not a single cup, a full French press, 2 mugs, a small pitcher of cream that she noted was clearly there for him, not her. He'd remembered. Waverly sat her legal pad on the table and did not comment on the room, the table, or the coffee. "Mr. Hollis," she said, when Grant walked in 40 seconds later. "Ms. Nash." He set his own folder on the table and sat unhurried. "You annotated the agreement." "I always annotate agreements." 6 annotations. "You counted." Theo scanned it when you came in. "A beat. Standard procedure." "Of course it is." She pulled the paper toward her. "Annotation 1. Before we get to the annotations," he poured coffee into 1 mug, pushed it toward her side of the table without asking, poured his own, added cream. "I want to explain why I structured the acquisition this way." Waverly looked up from her legal pad. "You mean why you bought a company in under 2 hours?" "I mean, why this company?" He leaned back, easy and unhurried, the posture of a man who had decided to be straight with someone and was settling in for it. "Callaway and Reed has been on my radar for 14 months. The Meridian pitch you ran last February, I was in that room. The strategy you built was better than what my internal team had proposed for the same account. I passed on acquiring the agency then because the timing wasn't right. When the timing became right, I moved." Waverly was quiet for a moment. "The timing became right," she said carefully, "the morning after I declined your contract proposal. The timing became right," he met her eyes steadily, "because a board meeting I'd been waiting on concluded the night before. The acquisition had been in legal review for 3 weeks. A beat. The skyline sat there unhelpfully neutral. "You're saying it wasn't retaliation. I'm saying it was a coincidence with extremely bad optics. That is," she paused, recalibrating, "actually worse, because it means you had been planning to become my employer for 3 weeks while simultaneously offering me a personal contract." Something flickered across his face, almost looked like discomfort. "When you say it like that, is there another way to say it?" "Not particularly, no." He just admitted he was wrong without being asked. "I know. I was surprised too." Waverly looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look that takes inventory, not of appearance, but of architecture. What a person is built out of when the professional scaffolding comes down a little. She picked up her coffee, drank, set it down. "Annotation 1, she said. "Clause 4, performance bonus structure. The metrics are tied to billable hours, which disadvantages creative output over account management. I want a parallel track tied to campaign performance scores." Grant opened his folder, looked at Clause 4. "Define campaign performance scores. Client-reported outcomes combined with industry benchmark comparisons. I can send you the framework we use internally. It's more predictive than billable hours for creative work by about 40%. Send it. If the methodology holds up, I'll revise the clause." "It'll hold up." She moved to the next page. Annotation 2. "They worked through all 6 in 40 minutes.
Grant pushed back on 2, conceded 3 outright, and on the 6th, a clause about creative approval change that Waverly had flagged as a potential bottleneck, he didn't argue at all. He just drew a line through it with his pen and wrote "removed" in the margin. "Just like that?" she asked. "It was a bad clause. You're right that it creates bottlenecks. I included it out of habit, not strategy." Waverly stared at the crossed-out clause. She had prepared a full argument for that one, 3 supporting points, a precedent from a comparable agency structure. She had been ready. "You could have at least made me work for it," she said. "Why?" He looked genuinely curious. "You were going to win the argument anyway." And there it was. Not charm exactly, something more unsettling than charm. The specific quality of a person who is secure enough to acknowledge when someone else is right. Waverly Nash had negotiated with a lot of people. Very few of them had ever just said that. Waverly wrote "removed" on her own copy, moved her pen to the next line, realized there was no next line. They were done. It was 11:10 a.m. A different kind of quiet settled over the room. The working kind was gone, the one with purpose and friction and somewhere to direct your attention. This was the quiet of 2 people who had finished the thing they came to do, and now were just there together, with a half-full French press and a view of Chicago, and no immediate reason to leave. Waverly kept her pen. Grant refilled his coffee. Outside, a November front was moving across the lake, the sky going gray and theatrical, the way Chicago skies do when they've decided to make a point. "The Meridian pitch," Waverly said, because the silence had gone on long enough that she needed to put something in it. "You remembered it." "I remember work that makes me reconsider my assumptions." He was looking at the skyline. "Yours made me reconsider 3.
Which 3? He glanced at her sideways. Something in it that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite not one. "That's a longer conversation. I have time." She surprised herself saying it. She could tell by the slight pause before she finished the sentence that she hadn't entirely planned it. So could he. She could tell that too. "The first," he said, turning toward her slightly, "was that creative agencies are fundamentally reactive. Your pitch was structured as a market prediction model. You weren't responding to the brief. You were telling the client what they didn't know they needed yet." Waverly turned her coffee cup in a slow half circle on the table. "That's the only way to do work that lasts." The second was that the best person in a room is usually the one running it. That's not a business assumption. That's just arithmetic. And the third, he paused, just briefly, the kind of pause you'd miss if you weren't paying attention, and Waverly was always paying attention, was that I already knew before the acquisition exactly how this conversation was going to go. She looked at him. "How did you think it was going to go?" "You were going to push back on everything reasonable, concede nothing without documentation, and make me feel like I earned every yes." A beat. "I was right." "That's called due diligence." "I know." And the way he said it, quiet, certain, with the particular stillness of someone who had decided something and wasn't in a rush to announce it, made Waverly's very organized, very professional internal cabinet rattle slightly on its hinges. She stood up, gathered her legal pad, her pen, her annotated agreement with its 6 margins now matching his. "I'll send the performance metrics framework this afternoon. I'll have the revised clause language back to you by end of day." "Fine, fine." She picked up her bag, got halfway to the door. "Ms. Nash." She stopped, didn't turn around immediately, gave herself exactly 1 second, turned. He was still at the table, one arm resting on the back of his chair, looking at her with that expression she was starting to recognize, the one that was doing a lot more work than it appeared to be doing. "For what it's worth," he said, "the contract I proposed on Tuesday, I wrote it myself." She waited. "I've used outside counsel for every significant agreement in 12 years of business." A pause. "That one, I wrote myself." Oh, that was something." Waverly Nash, who prided herself on being 3 moves ahead of every room she walked into, stood in that doorway and was, for the first time in recent memory, not entirely sure what her next move was. She looked at him for a moment that lasted longer than neither of them acknowledged. "Revised clause language by end of day," she said finally. "Without fail." She left. In the elevator going down, Waverly stood very still and watched the floor numbers decrease, and thought about a man who had written a contract himself for her before he ever planned to become her employer, before he knew the timing would be catastrophic and the optics would be worse.
She thought about a round table with no head position and a French press, and I already knew how this conversation was going to go. The elevator doors opened on 21. She walked back to her office, sat down, and stared at the performance metrics framework she needed to send, opened a new email, typed his address, deleted it, typed it again, sent the framework with 2 lines. Methodology attached. Let me know if you need the supporting data. His reply came in 6 minutes. Grant Hollis. Methodology holds up. Clause revised. Also, the third assumption I mentioned, I was wrong about that one too. Waverly read that last line 4 times, did not reply, closed her laptop, sat back, and tried with moderate success to remember what it felt like to be a person whose professional life was completely straightforward. She couldn't quite get there anymore. Funny how fast things change. There are exactly 2 types of people in the world. Those who can say no to an 82-year-old woman who has driven through a snowstorm to make a point, and those are the rest of us. Waverly Nash, as it turned out, was firmly the rest of us. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 3 weeks had passed since Thursday at 9 o'clock. In those 3 weeks, Grant Hollis had revised 4 clauses, approved Waverly's performance metrics framework without a single change, and sent her exactly 11 work-related emails that were entirely professional, and the content was appropriate. The response times, however, 7 minutes average, including one at 11:48 p.m. on a Saturday, told a different story to anyone paying attention. Waverly was paying attention. She was also pretending with considerable discipline that she wasn't. The arrangement was working. That was the important thing. The creative division had its new metrics. 3 of Hollis Capital's portfolio companies had already been introduced as potential clients. Danny Price got a raise and was now insufferably cheerful about it. Everything was progressing exactly as a professional transition should progress. And then, on a Wednesday morning in late November, Waverly's office door opened and Reese Calloway walked in without knocking. Reese Calloway, VP of Operations at Hollis Capital, was the kind of woman who communicated in full sentences but minimal words. She had sharp brown eyes, a permanent expression of mild amusement at the world's inefficiencies, and the particular energy of someone who had been watching a situation develop for weeks and had finally decided to do something about it. She sat down across from Waverly without being invited, sat a folder on the desk. "Grant has a problem," she said. "Good morning to you, too." "It is a good morning. Grant has a problem." She tapped the folder. "His grandmother's gala is December 14th. 80 guests, black tie, the Palmer House Ballroom." Waverly looked at the folder without touching it. "I'm familiar with the concept. Eleanor Hollis is 82 years old, has opinions about everything, and has been asking Grant for 2 years when he's going to bring someone to Christmas." Reese paused. "The December gala is the Christmas event. She moved it to the 14th because she wanted it before the actual holiday, so she could, and I'm quoting directly, properly assess any candidates before committing to a full holiday table." "She sounds terrifying." "She's magnificent," Reese said it with complete sincerity. "She's also the reason Grant hasn't missed a single one of these events in 12 years, and the reason he's been dreading this one since August." Waverly leaned back in her chair slowly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he won't." Reese met her eyes evenly. "He'll send an email, probably tonight, probably at a reasonable hour, professionally worded with zero indication of the actual stakes, and you'll read it and make a decision without the context." She stood. "I'm the context." She walked to the door.
Waverly stopped her. "Why does this matter to you?" Reese turned, considered the question with the brief, genuine attention she gave everything. "I've worked with Grant for 7 years." A pause. "He wrote that contract himself." She left. The folder sat on the desk. Waverly opened it. Inside a single card, cream-colored, engraved. "The Hollis Family Annual Gala, December 14th, the Palmer House, Chicago, black tie." And below it, in handwriting she was starting to recognize. "If you're willing, and only if you're willing, I'd like to ask you properly this time." Dawn asked. Not arranged, not structured, not presented with a clause and a consideration. Asked. "I told you Thursday was consequential." The email arrived at 7:14 p.m. that evening, which, for the record, she had predicted almost to the minute. It was 3 sentences. "Grant Hollis, you received the folder. The gala is December 14th. No contracts, no terms, no business considerations. Just a question, and you can say no." Waverly read it sitting at her kitchen counter with leftover Thai food and the particular stillness of someone trying to think clearly in a situation specifically designed to make thinking clearly difficult.
She thought about the round table, the French press. I wrote it myself. She thought about 11 emails averaging 7 minutes response time. About a man who crossed out a bad clause with a single line and said, "You were going to win anyway." About someone who had been watching her work for 14 months before any of this started, who remembered a coffee order from a February morning, who had apparently spent 3 weeks being professionally appropriate with the specific energy of a person exercising considerable restraint. She picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again, typed, "What time does it start?" His reply, 7. I'll send a car at 6:30. Her reply, "I'll meet you there." A pause longer than his usual 7 minutes, 14 this time. Grant Hollis, "Of course you will." She could not tell if that was exasperation or affection. She suspected, and found this extremely inconvenient, that it might be both. December 14th arrived with the confidence of a night that knew it was going to be significant. Chicago in December has 2 modes, brutal and beautiful. That night it chose beautiful, cold and clear, the kind of air that makes the city lights sharper, the Palmer House blazing gold at the end of the block like something out of a movie that knew it was being watched. Waverly wore deep green, not because of any occasion-specific calculation, but because it was the dress that made her feel most like herself. Structured at the shoulder, clean lines, the kind of thing that said, "I belong anywhere I decide to stand." She arrived at 7:02. Grant was already there just inside the entrance, and she watched him spot her from across the lobby before she was close enough for it to be anything other than the specific attentiveness of someone who had been looking for one person in particular. He looked, she filed this observation under strictly factual, exceptionally good in black tie, which was not useful information, but was unfortunately accurate. "You're late," he said when she reached him. "By 2 minutes, I noticed you were watching the door." "I was greeting guests." "You were watching the door." A beat. The corner of his mouth moved. "You look," he stopped, started again with the particular care of someone choosing words for a reason. "You look like yourself. That's rarer than it sounds." Waverly looked at him for a moment. That might be the best thing anyone said to me at a black tie event. The bar at black tie events is very low. It really is. The gala was everything the Palmer House promised. Candlelight and architecture and the specific warmth of a room full of people who had known each other long enough to stop performing for each other. Grant moved through it with the ease of someone on home territory, introducing her without fanfare, neither overstating the connection nor understating it. Waverly Nash, creative director at Callaway & Reed. Simple, clean, her own identity intact. She noticed that. She noticed a lot of things, moving through that room beside him, the way he checked without looking like he was checking, whether she needed to be rescued from a conversation, the way he disagreed with a board member about a market projection without making it a confrontation, the way he laughed at something genuinely funny with his whole face, no performance in it. 40 minutes in, a hand touched her elbow, light and certain. She turned. Eleanor Hollis was 5'2", white-haired, dressed in silver that probably cost more than the car Waverly drove, with eyes that were Grant's exact color but sharper, honed by 80 decades of watching people and being right about them. "You must be the one," Eleanor said without preamble. "I'm Waverly Nash. I know who you are. I looked you up the day after Grant mentioned you." She said it the way people say things when they find evasion tiresome. "He mentioned you in October, by the way, before any of this agency business. Mentioned you in the context of a pitch meeting he had attended." Waverly felt something shift very quietly in her chest. "He mentioned me in October," he said. "And I remember precisely because Grant never volunteers information about individuals. There was a woman running a pitch on the 21st floor today who made me rethink 3 assumptions." Eleanor tilted her head. You know how many times in 12 years he has said something like that to me? I'm guessing this was the first." "You're guessing correctly." Eleanor studied her with the calm assessment of someone who had long since stopped wasting time on social niceties when curiosity was more efficient. "Are you going to make him work for it?" "I'm sorry. He's been careful his whole life. Careful with the business, careful with people, careful with everything that matters." A pause. Sometimes careful needs someone to be worth being reckless for. She patted Waverly's arm once, firm and decisive. "I like you. You have good posture, and you didn't flinch when I walked over. Most people flinch." She moved away into the crowd with the unhurried authority of a woman who had said exactly what she intended to say. Waverly stood very still for a moment. "She talked to you." Grant materialized at her shoulder. "She did. For how long? Long enough. He looked at her sidelong. Should I be concerned? Probably. He was quiet for a moment, watching the room. Then, quietly, what did she say? Waverly considered him. The profile of a man who built things carefully and meant them, who wrote contracts himself and sent emails at 7 minutes and noticed coffee orders in February. She said you mentioned me in October, Waverly said, before the acquisition, before any of it. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Grant looked at the middle distance for a moment, then at her, with the directness of someone who had decided, apparently right now, to stop being careful about this particular thing. The pitch you ran, he said quietly. I left that meeting and told my driver to go around the block twice because I needed to think a beat. I don't do that. Waverly looked at him. The candlelight moved. The room hummed with other people's conversations. Grant, she said. Yeah, the original contract. Yes. Clause 7. She'd read it 4 times since Tuesday. She'd been waiting to say this. Clause 7 said, genuine social compatibility required. That's not standard boilerplate. His jaw shifted slightly. No, it's not. You wrote that one yourself, too. Yes. Waverly turned to face him fully. This close, the distance between careful and reckless was approximately 6 inches, and one decision. I didn't come tonight because of the agency, she said. I want to be clear about that. Something in him went very still, the particular stillness of someone receiving information they'd been trying not to want too much. I know, he said, quiet, certain. I know you didn't. Eleanor Hollis from across the room watched the two of them standing close in the candlelight and turned to the woman beside her with the satisfied expression of someone's 82 years had included extensive pattern recognition. About time, she said, to no one in particular. About time. They stayed until nearly 11. Walking out through the Palmer House lobby, the city cold and brilliant outside the glass doors, Grant's hand found the small of her back for exactly the length of a revolving door, brief, certain, gone before she had to decide what to do about it. On the sidewalk, their breath visible in the December air, they stood for a moment in that specific pause that exists between what has been said and what comes next. I'll get you a car, he said. I can get my own. I know you can. He looked at her. Let me. She looked back. Okay, she said. It was such a small word for the size of what it meant. The car came. She got in. He closed the door. Through the window, she saw him still standing there as the car pulled away, hands in his pockets, the Palmer House gold behind him, watching her go with the expression of a man who had just made peace with being very, very far from careful. Waverly faced forward, smiled at the windshield where nobody could see it. There she is, said the narrator warmly. There she is. Here's what nobody tells you about the morning after a night that changes things. Everything looks exactly the same. Same coffee, same commute, same desk, same view, same stack of emails that accumulated overnight with the indifference of a world that did not know something had shifted. The city doesn't pause for personal revelations. Chicago, especially Chicago, has a particular talent for continuing regardless. Waverly arrived at her office at 8:52 a.m. on December 15th with a completely normal expression and the internal atmosphere of someone trying to file a Category 5 event into standard storage. It wasn't fitting. It was never going to fit, but let her try. The email from Grant arrived at 9:03, not 7 minutes, not an evening response, 9 o'clock in the morning, which was new. And the subject line, which had always been a project name or a clause number or a company reference, simply read December 14th. She opened it. Grant Hollis, I've been thinking about what you said about Clause 7. I want to finish that conversation. Not at the office, not about the agency dinner this week, if you're willing. Gee, Waverly read it twice. Then she did something she had not done with any one of his previous 11 emails. She closed her laptop without replying. Not because she didn't want to precisely, because precisely she did, and she needed 20 minutes to think about what that meant before she said anything. She couldn't walk back. 20 minutes, noted the narrator, down from the 4 seconds she needed in October. Progress. The complication arrived at 10:30 in the form of a man Waverly had not expected to see walk through the door of Callaway and Reed on a Thursday morning in December. Brett Callaway, 41, founding partner at the Callaway and Reed, who had sold the agency 4 weeks ago and been conspicuously absent since, walked in with the particular energy of someone who had made a decision overnight and was committed to it before the coffee wore off. He was handsome in the way that photographs well and dimmed slightly in person. Waverly had known him for 7 years. She knew the energy. She did not love the energy. "Waverly," he stopped at her open door, smiled. "You have a minute?" "I have several." She gestured to the chair across from her desk, which was starting to get a lot of use. "What's going on, Brett?" He sat, leaned forward in the way of someone about to propose something they've convinced themselves is reasonable. "I made a mistake selling." Waverly waited. "The terms were good. The timing made sense on paper, but I've been thinking. I built this agency 12 years, and Hollis comes in, and in 4 weeks it's—" He paused, searching for the word. "Different. Different is the point of an acquisition. Different in ways I didn't authorize. You authorized them when you signed the sale agreement." Brett looked at her steadily. "The board of Hollis Capital has a provision for management buyback within 90 days of acquisition. If 3 or more senior leaders petition for a structured return to independent operation, it triggers a review." He paused. "I need your signature, Waverly." The room was very quiet. "You want me to sign a petition to undo the acquisition. I want you to help me get this agency back." "And there it is," said the narrator with the tone of someone who had been waiting for this.
Waiting for this particular wrench since Chapter 2, the complication right on schedule. Waverly looked at Brett Calloway for a long, even moment. She thought about $4.8 million in renewed contracts, the performance metrics framework, now approved and running, 3 portfolio introductions already in motion, Danny Price's raise, the creative division's first quarterly projections under the new structure, which were, and she would not pretend otherwise, the strongest numbers they'd posted in 3 years. She thought about a man who crossed out bad clauses with a single line. She thought about, "You were going to win anyway." "Brett," she kept her voice level, "walk me through what you think changes if the buyback goes through." "We get independence back, creative control, no corporate oversight on—" "We have creative control now. That was in the retention agreement, on paper, Clause 3, Paragraph 2. I negotiated it myself, in front of the full team, on the record." She looked at him steadily. "What's this actually about?" Brett was quiet for a moment, then with the honesty of someone who'd run out of the other option. "He's going to absorb us fully. Inside 18 months, Calloway & Reed stops existing as a brand and becomes a Hollis Capital creative division. Do you have documentation of that?" "It's a pattern. I've looked at his other acquisitions." "That's not documentation, that's inference." "Waverly, I'm not signing." Brett, quiet, certain. "Not because of anything personal, because the structure we have now is working. The team is stable, and destabilizing it on an inference 3 weeks into a transition would be professionally irresponsible." Brett looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face. Not anger exactly, something more complicated than that. "Is it not personal?" he said carefully. Waverly met his eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means I've seen the email response times. I was copied on the transition correspondence." A pause. 7 minutes, Waverly, at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. The silence stretched. "You should go," she said, not unkindly, definitively. He went. She sat with it for 45 minutes, alone, door closed, the Chicago skyline doing its unhelpful neutral thing outside the window. Brett wasn't wrong that it wasn't purely professional. She knew that. She'd known it since the revolving door. But he also wasn't right that it was only personal. The numbers were real. The structure was real. The work was better. She opened her laptop, opened Grant's email, typed, "Dinner works Thursday," deleted it, typed, "Before dinner, I need to tell you something. Brett Calloway came in this morning. Management buyback provision. He wanted my signature." Sent it before she could decide whether it was the right thing to do. It was. She knew it was. Whatever this was becoming, she was not going to let it become something built on things unsaid. His reply came in 4 minutes, not 7. 4. "Grant Hollis, I know about the provision. I was going to tell you Thursday. Are you okay?" She stared at the last 3 words. Not "what did you tell him?" Not "did you sign?" Not a single word about the business implication. "Are you okay?" Waverly pressed her fingers briefly to her mouth, looked at the ceiling, made the expression of someone receiving kindness they hadn't braced for. Typed, "I'm fine. I didn't sign. And yes, Thursday. Grant Hollis, Thursday. And Waverly, thank you for telling me." She told him before he could tell her. He thanked her for it. The narrator would like to submit this exchange as evidence in the ongoing case of 2 people being, against considerable odds and their own best efforts, exactly right for each other. Thursday arrived. Not a conference room, not the 32nd floor.
A restaurant in River North that was warm and unhurried. The kind of place designed for conversations that needed room to breathe. Low light, good wine, the sound of the city kept politely at a distance. Grant was there when she arrived, standing, not seated, which she noticed. "You're not late," he said. "I know." She sat, looked at the menu that she wasn't reading. "You said you wanted to finish a conversation." "I did. About Clause 7? About Clause 7. He set the menu down, looked at her with the directness that she had come to understand was simply how he was. Not a tactic, not a performance, just the specific honesty of someone who'd decided a long time ago that precision was kinder than ambiguity. "I wrote that clause because I wanted to be around you. I constructed an entire contractual framework around that fact and presented it to you as a business proposition because I didn't know another way to—" He stopped. "Because you didn't know another way to what?" she asked. "To give you a reason to be in my life that you could evaluate on your own terms." A pause. "You don't take things you didn't choose. I knew that from the Meridian pitch. I didn't want to give you something to refuse. I wanted to give you something to consider." Waverly was quiet for a moment. "That is," she said finally, "the most elaborately constructed thing anyone has ever done in my direction. I'm aware it was excessive. It was completely excessive. Yes, you bought a company. The timing was genuinely— I know, I believe you." She looked at him steadily. "That almost makes it worse, you know that. It wasn't even strategic, it was just the universe having a terrible sense of humor. The universe has been consistent on that front. It really has." The wine came. The waiter laughed. The city hummed quietly beyond the windows. "The buyback," Waverly said. "Brett thinks you're going to absorb the agency, eliminate the brand." "That was the original 18-month plan. Yes." Grant held his gaze. "It's not anymore." "When did that change?" "When I realized that what makes Calloway and Reed worth anything is a specific culture that doesn't survive absorption. A beat. And that the person who built that culture would walk out the day it started. You changed a business plan. I revised a strategy based on better information. That's just operations, Grant." "Yes, you changed a business plan because of me." He looked at her for a moment, then quietly, with the simplicity of someone who was done being careful. "Yes." The dinner lasted 3 hours, not because they ran out of things to say, because they kept finding more. The Meridian pitch turned into a conversation about what it meant to do work that actually changed something. That turned into Chicago versus every other city. That turned into the specific loneliness of being good at something that keeps you too busy to notice you're lonely. That one landed quietly between them and stayed. "You noticed?" Waverly said. "In October, after the pitch." "I noticed," he confirmed. "I went around the block twice. Because of 3 assumptions. Because of 3 assumptions." He looked at his glass, then at her. "And because you walked out of that conference room and I had the completely irrational thought that I hoped you'd come back." "I didn't come back." "No." The corner of his mouth moved. "You made me come to you." "I didn't make you do anything." "No, you didn't."
Something in his voice shifted warm and certain. That was the point. Outside, afterward, the December air sharp and clear. They stood on the sidewalk in the particular stillness of a night that has given everything it had and is waiting to see what comes next. "Walk," he said. "It's 28 degrees. "I know." She looked at him, at the city behind him, at this person who had gone around the block twice in October and written a contract himself, and thanked her for telling him something hard, and changed business plan, and was now suggesting a walk in 28 degrees Chicago December, because apparently neither of them was ready for the night to end. "Okay," she said. They walked 2 blocks north on Michigan Avenue, their breath visible. The city lit up the way it gets in December when it's trying to remind you that cold and beautiful are not opposites. Somewhere around the 2nd block, without discussion, without ceremony, his hand found hers. She didn't pull away. She didn't say anything about it. She just kept walking beside him, hand in hand in 28 degrees in Chicago, which was, she thought, a completely unreasonable place to fall for someone, and also absolutely perfect. The narrator, for once, said nothing at all. Some moments don't need commentary. Here's the thing about happy endings. They're not endings at all. They're the moment when 2 people stop negotiating with themselves long enough to say the thing they've been circling for months and find out, with the particular relief of a held breath finally released, that the other person has been circling the same thing from the opposite direction.
That's not an ending. That's a beginning with excellent backstory. 3 days after the walk on Michigan Avenue, things were different. Not dramatically, not in the ways that announce themselves, subtly different. The way a room changes when someone opens a window. Same room, different air. Grant's emails still came at professional hours, but the subject lines had evolved. December 14th had become re-December 14th, then re-Thursday, then soar on a Sunday morning. Simply, good morning. Waverly had stared at good morning for a full minute, then typed back, good morning, then sat with the wild, quiet fact that 2 words had never taken her that long to send. Danny Price, who noticed everything and said most of it, stopped in her doorway on Monday with the expression of someone assembling evidence. You've smiled at your phone 4 times this morning. I smile at my phone regularly. Not like that. Go back to work, Danny. I'm just saying, whoever it is, good for them, because you've been, Danny, going. He went, but he was smiling as he left, which Waverly chose not to address because she didn't have a counterargument that held up. The final complication arrived on Wednesday, not from Brett this time, not from the business side at all. It arrived in the form of a phone call from Marcus Webb, Waverly's former mentor, founding partner of Webb Creative in New York, who had been trying to recruit her for 2 years, with the patient persistence of someone who believed eventually she'd run out of reasons to say no. The partnership offer is back on the table, Marcus said, without preamble, because that was how he operated. Full equity, New York, January start. We'd build the Chicago satellite around you within 18 months. Waverly was quiet. Waverly, I'm here. This is the one. We both know it. You've been ready for this for 3 years, and you've been standing in your own way. That's a kind way to say I've been making deliberate choices. It's an accurate way to say you've been afraid to want something big. Not unkind, just Marcus, who had known her long enough to say the true thing. You built something real at Callaway. You can build something larger on your name. She looked out the window. Chicago, mid-December, the lake gray and massive in the distance. Give me a week, she said. You have until Friday. A pause. Gentler. I'm not trying to pressure you. I'm trying to make sure you don't let something good stop you from something great. He hung up. Waverly put the phone down, looked at the city. She didn't tell Grant that day. She told herself it was because she needed to think first, clearly, independently, without the weight of anyone else's reaction in the room while she did it, which was true. That part was true. The part she was less comfortable examining was that she was afraid of what it would mean to tell him, afraid that wanting to stay would feel like giving something up, afraid that wanting to go would feel like losing something she'd only just found. Afraid, most precisely, that for the first time in her professional life, she couldn't fully separate the decision from the person. She stayed late, went through the numbers, not because she didn't know them, but because movement helped her think. Webb Creative's offer was real, the equity was real, New York was real. So was the performance metrics framework she'd built, now running across 3 portfolio companies. So was the creative division's strongest quarter in 3 years. So was a man who changed an 18-month business plan and walked with her in 28 degrees and sent good morning on a Sunday. She was still at her desk at 7:30 when her office door opened. Grant stood in the doorway, jacket on, clearly on his way out, clearly not expecting to find her there. "You're still here?" he said. "I'm still here." He read her face the way he'd been reading it since October, with the specific attention of someone who paid close attention and didn't pretend he wasn't. He came in, sat down across from her in the chair that had become, somehow, his chair. Didn't ask, just waited. That, the narrator noted quietly, is a rare quality. Waverly looked at him. Marcus Webb called today. A beat. The Webb Creative founder? Full equity partnership. New York, January. Something moved across his face. Controlled, but there. The specific stillness of someone absorbing news they're not going to make about themselves, no matter how much it lands. That's a significant offer. It's the offer I've been waiting for 3 years. Then you should take it. She looked at him. Just like that? Not just like that. Quiet level. But if it's what you want, then the fact that you'd be leaving here, leaving me, is not a reason to say no. I'm not going to be the thing that stands between you and something you've worked for. He said it without flinching, without angling, without making it a negotiation. Just said it. Waverly was quiet for a long moment. What if I don't want to go? She said. He held her gaze. Then that has to be because New York isn't the right move, not because of me. What if it's both? Waverly, what if New York isn't the right move and you're part of why I know that? She leaned forward slightly, and there was something clarified in her now, the specific quality of a person who has finished thinking and arrived at the thing that was true all along. I have spent 12 years making every professional decision on pure merit, clean logic, no interference, and I'm good at it. I know I'm good at it.
You're exceptional at it. But I've also spent 12 years making sure nothing personal ever complicated anything professional. And the result is that I've built a very impressive career in a very clean, straight line, and I go home to an apartment that is perfectly organized and deeply quiet. She paused. I'm tired of the clean, straight line, Grant. He was very still. I want the web offer because I've earned it and because Marcus is right that I'm ready. And I want to stay because what we're building here, the work, the structure, all of it, is the best professional environment I've ever been in. A breath. And I want to stay because of you. All three things are true at the same time, and I'm done pretending the third one doesn't count. The room was quiet for a long moment. Grant looked at her with the expression of a man who had gone around the block twice in October and written a contract himself and sent good morning on a Sunday and changed a business plan. The expression, in short, of someone who had been waiting for this specific sentence without letting himself know he was waiting for it. If you stay, he said carefully, what does that look like? I want to build the New York satellite here, not as a subsidiary, as a Callaway and Reed expansion, our brand, our structure, feeding into Webb's network on a partnership model, not an absorption model. She watched his face. I already drafted the framework. A pause. Of course you did. It's a strong framework. I don't doubt it for a second. I'd need Webb to agree to revised terms, and I'd need you to back the expansion structurally. Real backing, not a favor. Send me the framework. I haven't finished it. Send me what you have. She looked at him for a moment, at this person who had been from the very beginning someone who met her exactly where she was. There's one more thing, she said. Tell me. Whatever this is, she gestured briefly at the space between them. It needs to be its own thing, separate from the business. Not a clause, not a consideration, not something that exists because of an acquisition or a contract or any professional structure. She held his gaze. If we do this, I need it to be a choice, just a choice. Grant was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, came around the desk, and, not rushed, not dramatic, just with the unhurried certainty of a man who had made a decision and was done deliberating about it, he stopped in front of her. Waverly Nash, he said. No contracts, no clauses, no business considerations. A pause, and something in his voice that was the furthest thing from boardroom or strategy or careful. Just, will you let me take you to dinner on Friday? Not a meeting, not a transition discussion. Dinner, the two of us. She looked up at him. This close, the distance between careful and certain was nothing at all. I have a condition, she said. Of course you do. We split the check. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then he laughed fully, genuinely, with his whole face, the way he had at the gala. No performance in it. The laugh of someone surprised into joy. Deal, he said. Deal. She called Marcus Webb the next morning. He answered on the second ring with the patience of someone who had been expecting this call and had already decided to be reasonable about it. She proposed the satellite model. Chicago anchor, Webb Creative Partnership, Callaway and Reed brand intact, expansion funded jointly. Marcus was quiet for 11 seconds. She counted. You want to build something, he said. I want to build something that lasts on terms I designed. Another pause. Send me the framework. Check your inbox. I sent it this morning. A sound on the other end that might have been a laugh. You already sent it. I work fast. You always did.
a warmth in his voice now, the specific warmth of a mentor watching someone step fully into what they were always capable of. "I'll read it today, but Waverly, for what it's worth, I think you made the right call." "I know," she said. "That's why I made it." Friday, dinner, River North again. Same restaurant, different table. This time by the window, the city fully present outside the glass. No legal pads, no annotated agreements, no professional agenda. Just two people in a shared check and 3 hours that went the way the Thursday dinner had gone and the way the walk had gone. The way things go when two people have finally stopped managing the distance between them. At one point, somewhere in the second hour, Grant said, "For the record, the original contract, yes, Clause 12. Did you read Clause 12? Waverly thought back. She had read the contract 4 times. Clause 12 had been, she paused, governing law, Illinois, and a provision, subsection B, that voided the entire agreement if either party developed, and I'm quoting, a genuine personal interest that supersedes the contractual arrangement. She stared at him. "You built in a self-destruct clause." "I built in an exit," he said, "for both of us, in case it became real." "You wrote a contract with a clause designed to make it irrelevant." "I wrote a contract hoping it would become irrelevant." Waverly looked at him for a long moment. Then she put her face briefly in her hands, which was the most unguarded thing she had done in recent professional memory. "You," she said from behind her hands, "are the most complicated, straightforward person I have ever met. Is that a problem?" She lowered her hands, looked at him at the candlelight and the city, and this person who had gone around the block twice and written a self-destruct clause into a contract he hoped she'd never sign. "No," she said, "it's really not." Eleanor Hollis, who heard about Clause 12 approximately 4 days later via the specific intelligence network of a woman who has been paying attention for 82 years, said only, "Well, he always did overcomplicate the obvious." She was smiling when she said it. The check came. They split it. Outside, the December cold, sharp and familiar now, not hostile, the kind of cold you've made peace with. Grant's hand found hers the way it had on Michigan Avenue, like it belonged there, like it had been finding its way there since October and had finally stopped pretending otherwise. "The framework," Waverly said, "for the satellite. I want to present it to you and Marcus together. Neutral ground, January 2nd week. I'll have Theo set it up. I'll send the final draft Monday." "Waverly, we're not doing business right now." She looked at him sideways. "I know. I know." She tightened her hand slightly in his, force of habit. A pause. "Old habit." He looked at her. "Getting better," he said rapidly. She agreed. "And right there is where we leave them. Not at a grand declaration, not at a dramatic gesture or a pivotal kiss in the rain or any of the things that look good in highlights and feel hollow in reality. We leave them at a sidewalk in December, hand in hand, talking about a meeting in January, with the easy shorthand of two people who have figured out how to be both professional and personal, structured and open, building something real on both fronts at once. We leave them at a beginning with, as promised, excellent backstory. Waverly Nash did not sign the convenience contract. She got something better, something she chose on her own terms, in her own time, with her own clause structure, which was, if you think about it, exactly how it was always going to go. The end. Thank you for watching. Now go tell someone you went around the block for. They probably already know, but say it anyway.